Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Down the Tee Tennis Podcast. We're here today to review the Italian Open in Rome, the men's and women's 1,000 events, singles draws we're going to be going through mainly. And so starting with Iga Świątek taking the title on the WTA side. Fantastic achievement for her, fifth straight title, 28th match win in a row, as we'll come on to very much, beating Ons Jabeur in the final, and Novak Djokovic winning his sixth Rome title on the ATP side, and a record extending 38th Masters 1000 crown. So, Kieran, we can start on the WTA side with the final. As I mentioned, Świątek beating Ons Jabeur in the final. First of all, just what did you make of the tournament overall? How much did you get the chance to watch, and did you enjoy it?
I watched a fair bit of it. I think there were some good stories in there. I think Andreescu is a good story. We talked about her a bit before because she got a couple of wins in Madrid, didn't she? And I feel like she took another step forward. Fell in the end to Iga Świątek in the quarterfinals. I mean, the second set went poorly, lost with a bagel, but she competed so hard in the first set. She was unlucky to lose it. I think there was one line call in the tiebreaker. It might have been at 3-2. Where it was called in, she thought it was long. The line judge's initial call before the umpire got out of the seat was that it was long, and I think Andreescu felt it should have been a point replay. She felt the call affected her play, but the umpire ruled otherwise. I think Laura Robson agreed with the call as well, saying she doesn't think Andreescu was going to get racket on it. And I think the tiebreak really unravelled after that for her, and that's maybe the moment the match was lost. But winning 6 games against Iga Świątek, there's a lot of players that, have won games in both sets and haven't got anywhere near that recently. So I think she can't be too disheartened by her effort there. Aryna Sabalenka looked to make a little bit of a revival. We know that she struggled this year, especially with her serve, beating Anisimova in the quarterfinal. That's a decent win because Anisimova is in decent form herself, getting a few decent wins here and there. And another one who's had a bit of a revival but then lost to Iga Świątek, and that's just the way the WTA tour seems to be going at the moment. I said last time, I don't see where her next loss is coming from at the moment, because she just has seemed a level above. And I think the interesting thing in this tournament is there's been times where she's looked a bit susceptible. Like, I think the first set against Victoria Azarenka as well. She was lucky to come through about 6-4, really. Azarenka competed with her all the way, and she actually struggled on serve, I feel, quite a lot, Świątek, in that match. Wasn't very dominant behind her serve. There was a lot of breaks going both ways, but she just managed to scrape through that first set and then steamrolls the second set. So she's just in that form, that winning form. She's got that winning mentality going. And even when things are getting tough for her at the moment, she's finding her way through. And that's a sign of a great player for me, to win sets when you're not at your best.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point about even when she hasn't been at her very best, she's still winning sets convincingly. That's just the one tiebreak she was pushed to in the tournament against Andreescu, as you mentioned there, which was a great first set to watch. And only dropping 21 games in a 5 matches at the tournament, obviously not losing a set. It's still, even if she's not at her best throughout the whole tournament, there's still a really dominant title run, which we've seen in these 5 straight titles that she's won this year, which is an incredible event, 4 which of WTA 1000 events, which, it is a fantastic run. She's been on from the hard courts and now on at the clay, as we would have expected more previously, but we've seen it on both of the main surfaces on the tour now. So, but yeah, going to that final where she beat Ons Jabeur 6-2, 6-2 Jabeur, it was a fantastic run for her to back up a Madrid title last week. Never easy to go back to back in Madrid and Rome, with this, the 2 big events in consecutive weeks, different conditions. So it was fantastic to see her get to a final again and really carry that run on. But Świątek was just too good in the final. What did you make of that?
Yeah, Ons Jabeur had a great tournament. I think she's another one that we kind of had a bit of a chat about before the tournament, because I think we felt that she had a chance here. Świątek was still the favourite, but she had a chance, and she come through some great matches. I mean, coming through Maria Sakkari in 3 sets in the quarterfinals, that was a great performance, especially after the way the first set went to regroup and find her tennis after that was fantastic. So she's had a good tournament, but she just ran into the best player in the world in the WTA at the moment in the final, and it is just the way it's been going with Iga. I think there's some great players that have come up. She's had quite a difficult run in this tournament, really. If you just look at the names, Victoria Azarenka in the 3rd round, a resurgent Bianca Andreescu in the quarterfinals, Aryna Sabalenka in the semi-finals, but she's just come through it in what looks like a relatively easy fashion. Hasn't dropped a set all tournament. It's insane, really, and that is just the way it's going at the moment. I think Jabeur, it was a shame how the final went after she had a great tournament, but it's awful to say after a heavy defeat. Well, not a heavy defeat, but a straight sets, 2-2 defeat, that she shouldn't be too disheartened by it. But it is just a case at the moment. It's going to take a performance of the lifetime, I think, to be Iga Świątek in the form that she's in.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Thinking, as you say, a fantastic run for Jabeur just to get the final. Obviously, she will be disappointed with the scoreline, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned that match against Sakkari in the quarterfinals. She was down 6-1, 5-2, and love 30 against Sakkari. I mean, that was some escape to come back from that, which looked like it was going to be a really one-sided defeat, and she managed to turn that around and then win the 3rd set quite convincingly. Then also against Daria Kasatkina in the semi-finals, she saved a match point in the 3rd set. So she really showed some character to come through those tough matches, and possibly fatigue could have been a bit of a factor by the end as well. But like you say, Świątek, I think it's even by that scoreline, it's no real reflection on a player to lose by any scoreline is Świątek at the moment. And just touching on that point on the dominance, since she lost the first WTA final to Polona Hercog, she's won all 8 she's played since then without dropping a set, and she hasn't lost more than 4 games in any set in those finals, which I mean is just it's a pretty staggering run. And I mean, what would you say that shows about her mentality, that in these big matches she's just turning up and winning pretty ruthlessly every time?
Following up on her Roland Garros win, there was a few questions thrown at her mentality. I think she had some struggles later on in tournaments at times, and she's one of the players on the tour actually that had a mental health coach. She always had a mental health person in her corner, and people wondered if that was a bit of a thing with her, that if it wasn't going her way, whether she'd snowball a bit. And I have seen it go like that with Iga Świątek before. Not this year, but in last year maybe, where when she struggled in a match, she has got a bit frustrated and maybe let it affect her too much. But I mean, she's gone forwards this year completely. I think there was a bit of a joke earlier in the season when she was winning quite a lot of matches in 3 sets, where it's like, she can't come through matches in straight sets. She's having to make everything a graft, and then she just starts winning straight sets all the time. It's it has been, she's been fantastic for years. Like, even last year when there were a few struggles later in tournaments, she was getting to the late stages of tournaments, and that's the key thing. If you're making the late stages consistently, you're clearly a top player. But this year she makes the late stages consistently and seems to win consistently as well. So it has been a huge step forward this year.
Yeah, that really has. And still on the WTA side, but move on to some of the other players who had impressive tournaments and strong runs there. You touched already on Bianca Andreescu and Aryna Sabalenka. Sabalenka bouncing back from an early exit in Madrid, and to follow up a semi-final in Stuttgart, where she was also beaten by Świątek. So some decent form for Sabalenka going in the French. And as you mentioned, it's great to see Andreescu back and playing this well. It was her first WTA 1000 quarterfinal on clay. So it's great to see. Also, so Daria Kasatkina, who I mentioned before, he played that a great semi-final against Jabeur. It was her strongest run for quite some time. Only a second semi-final at WTA 1000 level, first one since Indian Wells in 2018. So it was a really strong run for Kasatkina, who also beat Paula Badosa along the way. What did you make of her run? A bit of a resurgence for a player who's seen as a really talented young player, but has struggled a bit for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I don't think she's ever gone away completely, but she just didn't follow up on the early potential that she showed. I think for career titles in total, it's not really what we expected her to have at this stage of her career. She hasn't really got past the early stages of a slam in a few years as well. But I mean, the talent is there, and I mean, an encouraging run in Rome is a perfect thing going into the French Open to maybe break that duck and see the second week of a slam, because if there's any time you want to hit form, it's now. And like you say, the semi-final she played against Jabeur, really competitive match, went to 3 sets. She played quite well and pushed on Jabeur all the way, really, but just fell short in the end. So Ons Jabeur, she's been another player that's been fairly consistent, especially for the WTA for the last year or two, and it has seen a rise up the rankings. So to compete with a player like that, like I say, it's an encouraging sign going into the French Open, and I do feel like she may have a strong run, a bit of a resurgence in the slams as well there.
Absolutely, I definitely think she's capable and well suited to the clay. Definitely, she's always a player I've really enjoyed watching. So it is good to see her back in these sorts of big tournaments at the last stages. So touching on the other players who made the quarterfinals, and on the WTA side, we had 2 players who'd also made the quarterfinals in Madrid: Amanda Anisimova and Jill Teichmann, backing it up with more really strong runs. Anisimova, who also made the semi-finals in Charleston, so she's had a really strong clay court season and 2022 season in general so far. Teichmann also, as I mentioned, backing up in Madrid, and also Maria Sakkari, who we touched on against Ons Jabeur. What are your thoughts on that group of players who we've seen have strong results on the clay?
Once again, it's just that consistency heading into the French Open. If you consistently put in together good results on the clay, it's only going to stand you in good stead, especially, like I say again, the week before at the Italian Open, a 1000 event as well. It's only going to be great for confidence. I think, obviously, any player that gets to a quarterfinal will always be disappointed to go out at that stage. I think for Teichmann, it was a shame that she had to retire in that match. I hope that's not too big a concern going into the French Open. I think Anisimova, she'll have probably seen Aryna Sabalenka, based on recent form, as a huge opportunity to go one step further. But the thing is with Aryna Sabalenka is she is genuinely a top-class player. She's gone through troubles this season, but when she finds form, she's a match for anybody in the world. So nothing too disheartening for either of them in the quarterfinal, especially Teichmann, considering she didn't really get to play it properly. And I suppose the only thing is, once again, that question of fitness ahead of the French Open. But both players should be encouraged by that run.
Definitely, yeah. And as you mentioned, both players to look out for at the French Open. And just touch on Sakkari before we wrap up on the WTA side with 1 or 2 other players. Definitely, it's been impressive to see her continue the consistent results, but maybe a bit of a concerning loss from the big lead she did have. We have seen that a couple of times from her in the past in terms of struggling to close out matches and having won only 1 title. I think definitely for a player of her ability, as mentioned, the results have been fantastically consistent, really, but without maybe getting those big wins consistently or taking the next step to win more titles. So I think that's still maybe a mental bridge Sakkari has got to make, but she's putting herself in the position, so you've got to feel that there's a good chance she'll get there. So just touching on a couple of Spanish players who maybe haven't had the click or seasons you'd expect in Paula Badosa and Garbine Muguruza, who were two of the standout players really last year. Muguruza with a 6-7 record in 2022 is not had a good start to the year. In general, Badosa second round exits at the two 1000 events after a semi-final in Stuttgart, which was a good run. What have you made of the clay court seasons? Those two players you've had, you probably would have been seen as two of the real strong contenders heading into the clay.
I think for Badosa, it's going to be especially disappointing because of the form that she has shown this year and towards the end of last year as well. I think she rose to number 2 in the rankings. I'm not sure if she's dropped out of the number 2 now, but I mean that's the thing. She arrived into the clay court season in great form, and then in the clay court season you've got tournaments like Madrid, which, you know, it's essentially a home tournament for her, where she'd have been expected to do well. Just competing under the Spanish flag, people are expecting her to do well on the clay, and it hasn't really materialised for her this year. And I think she will be disappointed by her clay court season, but a good run at the French, and it's all forgotten about. I'm certainly not counting her out, but in the form that she's in, there's a question of confidence, questions about her game as well at the moment, maybe. So she's got a lot of questions to try and answer at the French Open, but I'm sure she'll find it again, because she has been, clay court season aside, a fairly consistent player once again in terms of making the later stages of tournaments this year. Garbine Muguruza, I think, weirdly, she'll be less disappointed because she hasn't found a form this year, and until the point that she does find that form, I think it is just about trying to get a win from somewhere. That second round loss to Putin-Server, it was a weird match. There was a bit of bad blood. There was a shot when Muguruza was at the net that went straight at her, and Muguruza was a bit angered by that. So it was a match that wasn't played in the greatest spirit after that. And I think that may have been Muguruza's undoing in that match as well. She maybe let that affect her a little bit too much, let the frustration get to her, and she's come undone in the final set. So once again, I'm sure she'll find form eventually, because she's too good of a player to not find a form, but I'm not sure it's going to be in the clay court season. It's been a while, but she's had good results on the grass before, so maybe that's where we'll start to see a resurgence from Garbine.
Yeah, definitely. And just a couple of final points on the WTA side. Had Simona Halep losing in the second round to Danielle Collins. Maybe a little bit of a surprise after the form she showed in Madrid and also the start of the season. But would you say that's still not too much of a concern for Halep going back in the right direction? And also, are there any other players we haven't touched on the WTA side you'd like to mention?
Yeah, for me, Halep, it's another one. It's you know, she's not that long back really from the injury issues that she suffered. She's working with a new team. She's had some good results here and there. I think she's actually been a little bit ahead of schedule, to be honest. And when I was starting to see her pick up wins consistently again, so you know, it's a knockback to lose in the second round. But she came through a Lee's corner in the first round, so that was a good little result. I don't think it's too disheartening for her. Once again, just pick back up and hopefully find some more form at the French Open. As I said, I still feel like she's ahead of schedule, really, in terms of how we've seen her step up and get results so quickly after her injury issues. Just on other players, I'd say you'd maybe look at Coco Gauff, and she's settled into being a fairly solid player. You know, there's still a lot of hype around her, really. It feels like it's calmed down a bit from that magical Wimbledon breakout a couple of years ago. She's another one. She's still extremely young. It feels like she's been around forever, but she's still extremely young. She's still, in my opinion, ahead of schedule in terms of where people think a game needs to be at the moment, and to just consistently, you know, pick up a couple of wins and occasionally make a long run. Here she beat Angelique Kerber in the first round. That's a tough first round opponent. Someone she's played before as well and competed with. Kerber, maybe not really got going this year, but it's still a really good first round win. That beat her. Do you call it a countryman if it's a woman? Compatriot, beat a compatriot, Madison Brengle, in the second round, and falls to Maria Sakkari. Sakkari is quarterfinal collapse apart. There's no shame in losing to Sakkari. She's a top player. So yeah, I think that's been an encouraging tournament for Goff, really.
Yeah, I would agree. So we can move on to the ATP side now in Rome, where, as I mentioned, Djokovic winning his 6th title at the event, second only behind Nadal's record, and Djokovic extended his own record of Masters 1000 titles to 38, just a couple ahead of Nadal now. Didn't drop a set in the week. I thought played a fantastic level, really, for the most part of what I saw, beating Stefanos Tsitsipas in the final yesterday. What did you make of Djokovic's run of the title, also the final win, which was pretty convincing?
Yeah, well, like you say, a win without dropping a set, which is quite weird for Djokovic recently. He tends to drop at least a set somewhere. So steamrolled his way through, really. Karatsev in the second round. Karatsev is someone who we haven't seen the best of this year. Wawrinka in the third. It was a lovely blast from a past game, but I think Wawrinka said himself that this game's come too early for him in his recovery, for him to feel like he can compete, and it kind of showed. There was a moment of magic or two. We got to see that backhand fire a couple of vintage shots in, but it just wasn't, the game wasn't there consistently enough. So, a win over Stan Wawrinka usually, if we're talking a few years ago, that's a brilliant sign, but I don't think we can read too much into that. The quarterfinal against Felix Auger-Aliassime, what a match, by the way. I feel quite bad for Felix that he didn't at least get one set out of that, because I do feel like he deserved to at least force it to a decider the way he played. But Djokovic, once again, just showing that mettle in the tough moments, 7-5, 7-6, it's when sets reach those late stages where just every point means something. That's when Djokovic really does seem to step up. Casper Ruud in the semi, Casper competed all right, but it was a straight sets victory in the end. And that final was a weird one. Tsitsipas just didn't get going. And then in the second set, he came out of the blocks quick, got a break early on, and you're thinking, Tsitsipas is forcing a decider here. And then it's just that collapse once again, as the set looks like it's getting away from Djokovic, he starts asking a few questions of Tsitsipas, and Tsitsipas crumbles. So a strong run, actually. Some good results in there. Come through a couple of tough matches. I'd say one tough match, and one match that looks like it was about to get tough until it wasn't. So I think he's probably established himself as the favourite for the French Open for me, especially with questions over Nadal's fitness and with that run right there.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to argue with that. And I think, it's interesting going into the tournament. Probably, certainly in maybe the bookmakers' odds, or in some people's view, was kind of the third favourite behind Nadal and Alcaraz. But I definitely think this has changed that to, for me, put him to at least joint favourite, if not a favourite, as you said. Nadal, obviously, will come on to you, who's another big talking point in this event. But just on Djokovic's first title of the year, obviously after the difficult start he had to the season with what happened in Australia. It's definitely, as he tends to do during the clay court season, he's timed it perfectly to sort of peak at Rome, heading into Roland Garros. Fantastic record at this event, so he looks very strong there heading into the French. As you mentioned, Tsitsipas making his first final in Rome. A really strong clay court season for him after winning Monte Carlo, quarterfinal Barcelona, semi-finals in Madrid. He's lost all 5 of his matches now with Djokovic on clay, but do you think Tsitsipas is still in the mix really for the French Open after continuing his really strong results on clay?
Yeah, definitely. as you've said, just another strong clay court season for him. You can have an out of sorts match. It doesn't really mean anything. I think everyone's had a match like that at some point in their career, and for the most part, this final aside once again, where he kind of came undone in the second set after getting himself on top. If you just brush that off and look ahead, I mean, look at the results as they are. You know, a couple of titles, a couple of finals. It's good form heading into the French Open. He made the final last year. He got himself 2 sets up, didn't he? And that's probably the closest he's been so far to winning a slam title. I think it was a huge disappointment for him to not come through that from the position he was in, but if anything, that'll have spurred him on even more. I'm thinking of when Dominic Thiem was 2 sets to 1 up against Djokovic at the Australian Open, and he looked primed to win that game because he was the one with all the momentum, and Djokovic just does what Djokovic does, and he wins matches like that. And if anything, Thiem took it as motivation to go on and not let it happen again and win his first slam title later that year. So I think if Tsitsipas shows kind of that same mentality of, okay, I've learned my lesson, I'm not going to let it happen again, and he finds his best tennis at the French Open, then he has got a chance. But like I say, Djokovic is still the favourite. Nadal, with questions over his fitness, is still probably the second favourite, and Alcaraz's form in 2022 probably has him as third favourite, but Tsitsipas is definitely a clear fourth favourite after those 3 for me.
Yeah, I would definitely agree on that with Tsitsipas. And just as I forgot to mention on Djokovic, did earn his 1000th ATP match win by beating Casper Ruud in the semi-finals, which was a fantastic achievement, only the 5th player to do that. So that was a great achievement, which, and getting to the semi-finals also secured the number 1 ranking for at least another week. So it just continues to break records and chase records. So it was fantastic to see Djokovic back and playing at that level again, which he has built up to. So we can stay on Casper Ruud, who he beat in that semi-final, which was, I thought, another good match. As you mentioned before, I thought the Djokovic auger-aliassime quarterfinal was an outstanding match, probably the best of the tournament. But what did you make of Ruud's run? I mean, we talked about him on the preview. He hadn't had a good clay court season. When there was big expectations coming in, given that all the winning he's done on clay, but he bounced back here with a strong run. Maybe he took a little bit of advantage of Nadal going out with the injury, which we're going to come on to. But he had a great win over Shapovalov in the quarterfinals, who'd beaten Nadal. Has Ruud put himself back in the conversation as maybe a player to have a strong run, at least at the French Open?
It's not quite done enough for me. It's a huge step forward, and yeah, I expect him to have a strong run. Actually, if we say the quarterfinals is a strong run, I think around quarterfinals he's got a chance. But as I said, a step forward, the best we've seen of him this clay court season. But I feel like the form he got himself into on the clay last year, if he had a similar level this year, I feel like it maybe makes that match against Djokovic a little bit closer. I don't know, maybe at least forces 1 set to a tiebreak, or even forces a 3rd set. I don't think he'd be the favourite against Djokovic, but I think he'd compete with him much more. I don't think he is quite at his best level on clay yet, because his results on the surface speak for themselves. But that win over Shapovalov, that's an encouraging win to be, can I call Shapovalov a top player? Yeah, Shapovalov is a top player. To beat a top player like that on the clays, it's a step forward. Wins against Brooksby and Van de Zandschulp as well. They're probably matches where, even though both of those players have shown good results here and there, but Casper Ruud is the clear favourite. I think against Shapovalov is probably maybe a slight favourite, but on current form, maybe not. In fact, that was a match, I think, going into it, it could have gone either way anyway. So an encouraging run, but yeah, I still don't think he's quite at his best level yet.
Yeah, no, I'd agree on that. And I would just mention on Ruud, it was his fourth Masters 1000 semi-final on clay, which is really strong number, but he has lost all those semi-final. I don't know if I said quarterfinal, semi-final, but he's lost those 4 in straight sets, which you'd say is maybe a little bit of a concern in the really big matches. He hasn't quite turned up yet. Oh, okay, 2 of those were against Djokovic, though, in Rome, so you can't maybe read too much into that. But that's maybe the next step for Ruud to earn that real big win against a top player and make it through to a final on the clay, which obviously he has done in Miami earlier in the year. And on the other semi-finals, we had Alexander Zverev reach the semi-final for the third Masters 1000 event of the season. So I find it a bit of a difficult one to assess with Zverev, because looking at that, he has had a good clay court season so far, bar in Munich, where he had the early exit. He's made the final in Madrid, the semis in Monte Carlo either. But would it be fair to say that in all those matches he's lost, he hasn't really performed particularly well? I thought maybe he made a decent start against Tsitsipas in that semi-final, but I thought it was kind of more Tsitsipas played poorly in that first set and improved. I thought Zverev really in the second and third was quite poor again, which we did see in the Madrid final. But what did you make of his run and where his form actually is right now?
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't see him as in slam contention form. I mean, if you look at, once again, if you just take the tournament results as they are, a final, a couple of semi-finals, it does look like he's in slam contention form, but when I'm watching him play, I don't feel like I'm watching a player that's towards the top of his game. There's still quite a few errors creeping in there, and also I don't feel like the match is on his racket a lot of the time to say that he has got big weapons in there. I mean, we know his serve can be dodgy, especially the second serve, but the first serve can be huge as well. And then it becomes that serve plus one thing, about that first shot after the serve. He can hit quite big. He can also defend as well for a big man. But yeah, I don't see him really taking the game to his opponent at the moment. I do feel like he's maybe gets trapped into when he comes up against someone that's another top player. He maybe does fall into just into being a little bit more passive at the moment, and that's why I don't feel like he's playing his best tennis, and I don't really see him as someone that I'm expecting to. He'll more than certainly make the quarterfinal, I think, at least once again. But I just don't see him ever getting a result. He's still never beaten a top 10 player in a slam, has he? And I don't see it happening now. I don't see him beating Tsitsipas at the French Open. Yeah, he's had this little mini series against him in Masters 1000s where he's won 1 and lost 2. So you'd say, okay, he's competitive at least. But I think when push comes to shove at the French Open, I'd predict Tsitsipas to win that match. Djokovic, I don't see Zverev coming through Djokovic at all at the moment. And I think the only way he comes through Nadal is if Nadal's foot starts playing up. So, and even then, I don't think it's a guaranteed. So, yeah, I don't think we have seen the best of Zverev really this year. But even in this clay court season where he has maybe taken a bit of a step forward, he's still not at his best level, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, as you said, this year as a whole really hasn't been the greatest for him. Hasn't won a title yet, and yeah, I mean, as we say, solid runs. But I think you'd say he had a fairly good draw really up until the semis. Then, and as you mentioned, you could see him going far in Paris, but to actually go and win the title and probably have to beat at least 2 of that group of Djokovic, Nadal, Alcaraz, Tsitsipas, you just can't see it happening when he hasn't had that top 10 win at a slam. But yeah, we'll move on to Nadal, who we've touched on was the other real big story of the tournament. Unfortunately, the foot injury resurfacing, well, not that it had gone away, but in terms of the pain resurfacing to a level which it really restricted him probably for the first time this year, as far as we're aware, and probably since the French Open last year in the back end of his match against Djokovic. So going out there in 3 sets to Shapovalov, a match he'd actually started really well, I thought, and we'd seen signs that his level was actually moving right towards where he'd won it, winning it 6-1 and actually starting the second set okay. But yeah, it was really sad to see it in the end with Nadal being forced, just unable to compete really in the end. What did you make of that, and what impact do you think that could have on the French Open? Obviously, it's hard to tell, but with only less than a week to go now.
I think it's getting heartbreaking to see these issues resurface every year. From the start of the year, where he wins the Australian Open, a tournament where results-wise it was probably his worst slam. He's probably been better there than Wimbledon recently, but he'd only won the tournament once. He's never the favourite going into the Australian Open, and the huge high of coming up against Daniil Medvedev in the final and winning in 5 sets. From that high to then moving on to his best surface, the surface where he seems to manage pain and injuries the best. Clay just naturally, it's a lower impact surface than hard courts and grass courts because it's a softer surface. But to see these issues resurface in a bad way, to the point where he was just limping about in the end in that Shapovalov match, and it was just that classic Nadal thing of he never wants to withdraw from a match or retire from a match. He wants to give the respect to his opponent of, if they've got themselves ahead in a match, not let them win, but stay and compete. And if they win, they win, let them have an untainted win to the record. I think any other player in the pain that Nadal was clearly in probably withdraws from that match, but he's actually quite difficult to watch when he starts limping around and he's just not competing the way we know that he likes to, because he's an insane competitor. The intensity that he tries to play out when he's fit, I don't think he's ever been fully fit recently, but when he's fit enough at least to go out and play his best tennis, he plays at an insane intensity, and maybe that's part of the reason that he goes through these issues. But at the same time, when people say that's had an effect on his career, he should have found a way to shorten points. He shouldn't train at the intensity that he does as well, where he trains near match intensity. He's had insane longevity. He's right up there with Djokovic and Federer, really. He's still winning slams in his mid-30s. You can't really say that at all. He does seem to go through more issues, but at the same time, what player in the mid-30s isn't going to go through injury issues? I just hope that, apparently he's practiced today as well. I saw a Nadal fan account tweet that apparently he's been practicing today, so he certainly seems to think that he's fit enough to play the French Open, and let's just hope that he plays as pain-free as possible to give himself the best chance possible, because to have a French Open where we've got Nadal, Djokovic, a young Alcaraz, a resurgent Tsitsipas, all going for the title, it could be a really strong tournament, a really enjoyable tournament. And, any two of those 4 players, if they're in the semis or the final, then we're likely to get a brilliant match, and that's what we want to see. So let's just hope that there's a chance of a Nadal Djokovic, Nadal Alcaraz, or Nadal Tsitsipas final, because I'm sure that it'll be an entertaining one.
Absolutely. So yeah, really, really hope that he is going to be in good enough shape to compete somewhere near his best, because, I mean, as you say, it'll make for such a fascinating tournament on the men's side with those 4 contenders, plus, the other great players we have on clay. But certainly it would be one of the most anticipated French Opens. We've seen so many players that you think have a genuine chance at winning it. So I really hope we are going to see him not in too much pain with that foot, because it would be a shame after after last year. With obviously, I think Djokovic absolutely won that match fairly. It was an incredible match, but certainly in the fourth set, it did seem to start to bother Nadal. So it would be a shame if, you know, potentially one of his last chances to win the tournament, where he's dominated like no one has at any other tournament. It would be a shame if he doesn't get the chance to win it when he's fully healthy. So let's hope we see that great battle between those players on the men's side. And going out in the third round in Rome did mean he's dropped to world number 5 below Tsitsipas. So by the looks of things, he's going to be seeded 5th at the French Open if Medvedev plays, which could be important for the tournament, depending on how the draw plays out, but could potentially play Djokovic in a quarterfinal. But it would mean that he wouldn't play Alcaraz until later, because Alcaraz is also going to be seated between 6 and 8, I think. So yeah, that's definitely something to watch out for when the draw comes out, but could really change how the draw looks. But yeah, staying on with Rome, one or two other points we didn't touch on. Jannik Sinner also reaching the quarterfinals, losing to Stefanos Tsitsipas, and auger-aliassime, we did mention, played that fantastic match against Djokovic. It was his 3rd straight quarterfinal on clay after Barcelona and Madrid. So I think he has proved that he really is making improvements on clay. It wasn't someone I was really expecting to see strong results on the surface yet, given what we've seen from last year. So yeah, what do you make of auger-aliassime's run? I touched on it before, and also Sinner having another solid run here.
I felt, especially looking at auger-aliassime's initial breakthrough, you know, the Rio final all those years ago as a teenager, that he would find the game on clay eventually. And he looks to have made a big step forward. Yeah, we associate him with, once again, quite a big serve. And he had his best results on grass last season. I think he had a good Wimbledon. So we do associate that as being his main asset. But I do think he can be a decent defensive player as well. He can get his head down and graft sometimes. And, you know, on clay, often you have to do that. You have to play longer points. You have to maybe just grind your way through points, through matches a bit more. And I do feel like he has that in his locker. He can be quite error prone sometimes, but when he's not quite error prone, he tends to be fairly consistent. You know, good length on his strokes off both wings. You know, hitting nice and deep fairly consistently when he finds his best tennis. So I do think he has got the game for clay, and it's been a fairly encouraging clay court season for him. I feel like he has made a couple of steps forward and is one to watch out for maybe next season. As for Jannik Sinner, once again, clay, people initially thought clay was his best surface because I think growing up in Italy, he played a lot on clay courts as a junior. He then probably started to get better results on hard courts for a spell, but you know, is very much in the Felix Auger-Aliassime category for me, where it seems like he's been around for a while, getting decent results for a while. And, you know, he's broke through into being one of the top players in the world. But in terms of making that extra breakthrough in winning more titles, in making the later stages of slams more often, that's the stage where he's at now, where we maybe need to see that from him.
Okay, so we'll move on to other talking points, kind of aside from the Rome tournament. And the interesting one is Daniil Medvedev returning to action for the first time since Miami. He's going to be playing on clay for the first time this year at the Geneva Open this week, and likely going to be playing the French Open as well. So a bit of a surprise maybe to see Medvedev, given he pulled out of all the clay court Masters 1000 events. Looked likely that we might not see him until a bit later. But yeah, it's going to be good to see Medvedev definitely at the French. And what do you make of that? And also, do you think there's any part of this which could be to do with not going to be able to play Wimbledon? So maybe he's more keen to play the French than he would have been otherwise, maybe because he's going to miss out on another Grand Slam.
I think the key message that I took from it is Yeah, the key message that I took from it is that he's showing how keen he is to meet his potential on clay. We saw a step forward for him on clay last year. He went further at the French Open, and yeah, from joking earlier in the clay season that he hates clay, he then went on to get some solid results, and there was kind of that thought of maybe we can see him get good results on the red stuff. And then this year, his clay season has been just decimated by that injury, by the operation that he's had, and the rehab from that. But he's now got a chance to play again, and to play a tournament like Geneva, 250, and heading into the French Open. It shows he could have easily just sat those tournaments out, but he's decided to come back and make an appearance on the clay and see if he can get some good results. So it's shown that he still believes in himself on the surface, that he can make strides forward on the surface, and maybe a little bit that situation where he's unlikely to be able to play Wimbledon has factored in as well, for definite, because if he's sitting out the grass court season, it's a while until we'd get the chance to see him playing again. So I'm sure that'll have had an impact as well. But I think the key message I took away from it is, yes, Medvedev is keen to really get going, get kick-started on clay.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing him on clay again. Looking forward to seeing him after we saw him reach the quarterfinals at the French last year. It's gonna be interesting to see if he can do that again, and if like the improvements maybe he's made on the surface. He'll obviously probably have just been training on clay since he's come back from the hernia surgery. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Obviously, still the world number 2, so possibly in contention for that ranking if he has a really strong run, or maybe if he takes the title in Geneva, then backs up at the French. So looking forward to that. And so as well as the ATP event in Geneva, there's also ATP tournament in Lyon this week. And on the WTA side, there's events in Rabat and Strasbourg ahead of the French Open, which begins on Sunday. So very much looking forward to that. Another point, which the news has come out today, Laura Robson has unfortunately retired from tennis at the age of 28, which is really, really sad to see. Fantastic young prospect in British tennis, definitely when she came through, and someone who reached a career high ranking of 27 in the world in 2013, reached the 4th round at both the US Open and Wimbledon in 2012 and 2013, respectively. Silver medalist at the London 2012 Olympics, playing mixed doubles with Andy Murray, but unfortunately been really set back for the last 7-8 years with firstly a wrist injury, which is a real blow, and then since had 3 hip operations due to hip injuries there. So unfortunately has decided that she can't carry on. What are your thoughts on that news, Kieran? It's a real shame to see such a talented player who had such a fantastic start to her career just cut short of so much of her potential.
Yeah, I think my reaction was pretty much disappointed, but not surprised. I think with each setback she had, it seemed like it'd take longer and longer before you saw her again, and she'd come back, but it wasn't long until she was having another setback. It's gutting, really. Like you say, the potential she showed when she was so young, making the late stages of slams as a teenager. That silver medal at the Olympics, playing alongside Andy Murray in the mixed doubles, that was a real high point as well. But yeah, it has seemed like with every passing setback, you've started to wonder a little bit more whether you'd see her again. And I think she's even admitted herself that it's going to be one of those where she'll always look back and think of what could have been. Because she lives and breathes the game. And I think that's one thing that I've noted from listening to a commentary on Prime Video this last week is, her knowledge of the game, and also a love for the game as well. the way she reacts when there's been an incredible point or an incredible shot just shows that there's a real joy for tennis there. So I know there's been questions with there's no questions here with the relatively young retirement. It is completely injury forced, but when players have retired young in the past, there's been questions of whether the love for the game was ever there. That's never been a question for Laura Robson, and for a player like that who's got so much talent and also got the work ethic and just, you know, the love of tennis, a player that's got all those attributes to not have the career that she deserved really is a shame. But I, you know, if I've got to look for an upside, it is that I'll look forward to hearing her more on commentary on Prime Video and anything else, because I do think she's been great to listen to. I actually rate her highly as a broadcaster.
Yeah, that's well said, and I agree. I've also really enjoyed listening to her commentary on Prime Video. And I think she's been on BT Sport in the past, but it was great to listen to her in Rome last week. It really great insight, and as you mentioned, you can sense the passion she still has for the sport. So hopefully that's going to continue. It's great to see that she's hopefully still going to be involved in the game. So just finally, before we wrap up, there's kind of bringing it back to a topic we covered last week in terms of the Wimbledon proposed ban on Russian and Belarusian players, which hasn't been any more news whether that's going to happen, not going to happen. It looks like it is still going to happen, but there has been a suggestion that no ranking points are going to be awarded this year by the ATP or WTA Tour for any players playing at Wimbledon in response to the ban on Russian and Belarusian players. It's quite a surprising move, but what did you make of that, Kieran?
I think it's just a real shame how this situation's developed, and for me, I have seen a couple of arguments recently. I still think it's unfair to punish Russian players for the actions of the country. You know, you have no control over where you're born, and you know, I think if you offered these players a chance to represent another nation, if they had that opportunity, they probably would. I think, you know, it's my guess that the majority of these Russian players do not agree with their actions of the country at all. And I think in the case of Andrei Rublev, there's no doubt about that whatsoever. But I have seen the argument made that just how much it'd be used as propaganda in Russia if a Russian player turned up to Wimbledon and won it, and I can kind of see that point of view now. I can see why. I think this has all really come from the UK government, by the way, as well. It's not actually Wimbledon's choice. It's UK government that don't want Russian sports people competing in events in Great Britain. So they've kind of forced Wimbledon's hand, and I can kind of see that point of view now, but my instinct is still it is unfair to punish individuals for things they have no control over. On the withdrawal of ranking points, which it looks like it's an action that's going to be taken, it's actually not been announced yet, despite the heavy rumours. I think that's a real shame as well, because it essentially turns Wimbledon into an exhibition tournament with big prize money. You know, it's a shame that it's developed like this. Tennis's most iconic tournament, I think probably the oldest tournament that's still going. For it to be kind of reduced to that is a shame. I don't know what the players' thoughts are on it, and most players seem to disagree with the ban on Russian athletes, but whether they think that ranking points should be removed as a result is another matter. I think it's going to be a shame for a lot of players. You especially look at sort of qualifiers, low-ranked players, that the ranking points that they can take from getting through a couple of rounds of Wimbledon can propel them so much in granting them access to better tournaments and therefore better prize money. It can really be a springboard for players to actually make a living out of tennis, rather than, you know, do the professional tour, but, you know, be hemorrhaging money or not making a real income out of it. So I'm sure a lot of players are going to suffer as a result, but whether it's just an action from the ATP and WTA to try and force a U-turn on on the situation of the ban of Russian players to see if they can force a U-turn there. That's a different matter. I kind of think there's meetings that need to take place between both sides, because of the way it's developing at the moment seems unfavourable for anybody. So I think there's got to be a middle ground somewhere, and I think that might be what this is. Take an extreme action to see if you can force them into kind of talks where you can meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it seems most likely to me that it probably is an attempt to do that. And like you say, it is really just unfortunate how the situation's developed. I mean, definitely, as we mentioned last week, I mean, I don't support the ban on the Russian and Belarusian players either. I don't think it's fair for them. And as you mentioned, the option even to compete for, as a neutral athlete, I think many would take that opportunity if they were offered it to play at the event. But definitely, I think, having no ranking points for any players, I don't think is a great solution, if it is anything other than trying to get Wimbledon to change their mind. Because I mean, I really think, as you explained well, it really hurts all the players competing at the event who don't get the chance to gain ranking points at the most prestigious tournament in the world. For most people, a dream to play there, and to not be rewarded with the chance to move up the rankings for having a great run is really unfortunate. So I hope that isn't the case finally. I think if the ban does stay in place, which would be really unfortunate, I think if that does have to happen, I think the best solution would maybe to carry over the points that the players who aren't able to play because of the ban, carry over the points they earned last year, so they don't drop all the points and have the chance to gain no points this year. So at least it's not going to impact their ranking as much. I think that would be the better solution to the unfortunate situation of being banned. But hopefully there's a better resolution before Wimbledon. We'll see what happens and keep you updated on that. But that brings us to the end of this podcast. Thanks to everyone very much for listening. It's been great to review a great tournament at the Italian Open and to cover the other topics as we had. As we mentioned before, that the French Open just around the corner now, starting on Sunday this week. Qualifying is already ongoing. The draw to come later in the week. So we'll be back once the draws are out to preview the men's and women's singles events. Very much looking forward to that. So we'll be back with the podcast to do that later in the week. Thanks everyone very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.